swear I had.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we usually get them all.
You should meet him though, he's nice, he's a great guy. I wish I had his energy.
Is it printed or?
Yeah. She came up on the parade out of school. Could be you.
Just one or two?
Just the one. Just
Sure.
go, go.
Did she?
We only have
idea.
the one speaker. Okay. And we're all ready, right? Just be a couple minutes.
All set?
I'm good, thank you, Joan.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to start this evening with our public comment. Tonight, we have one speaker, and that is Carolyn Healy, and you can work your way up to the table here, and let me just read the public comment expectations briefly. The school board encourages community input. While comments and questions are welcome, law prohibits the board from discussing concerns about individual employees or students in a public meeting. The board will not deliberate, discuss, or engage in conversation with speakers. However, the board may ask administration to review the concerns presented. Speakers must present their testimony in a respectful manner. Vulgarity, character attacks, malice, or specific complaints identifying staff or students by name or implication will not be permitted. We will stop the proceedings immediately if employee or student privacy issues are raised and direct the speaker to forward comments regarding individual employees or students to the superintendent.
In case you can't hear a word I say.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Great. Oh, thanks. Yeah. And then Carolyn, we have our timekeeper here, so she'll kind of have signs up for you.
Good.
To keep,
Thank
help
you very
keep
much.
time.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So good evening. My name is Carolyn Healy. I live in Lake Elmo. I am the new Students Demand Action Liaison for the Stillwater chapter of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America. I am smiling under this mask, by the way. Welcome, Dr. Funk. We're very glad you're here. Our team is grateful for what the district's done to disseminate information about our Be Smart Gun, Safe Gun Storage program, to clarify response in emergent situations, and to communicate reunification expectations. The meeting in February was very good in that regard. But there is so much more the district can do to reduce the likelihood of gun violence. I would feel immobilized if I believed that gun violence is inevitable. 5 years ago, 2 local professors from the Violence Project started researching mass shooters, and their research gave them reason to hope. They learned that there are things we can do right here, right now, to stop a mass shooting. Nearly 80% of school mass shooters leak their plans. They post threats on social media, or they tell their family and friends in person. This is a crucial opportunity for intervention. By training district employees, students, and parents to recognize signs of crisis, and providing student-endorsed tools to safely and effectively communicate that information, schools can proactively respond to warning signs. So my first request, Dr. Funk, is that you quickly make upstream prevention of gun violence a top priority. There are so many excellent right here, right now, no-cost tools and resources that can reduce that likelihood, if not prevent school shootings. Here are my additional requests. 1, please facilitate opportunities for students to have direct collaborative involvement in maintaining safety in our schools. Amplify their voices and allow them a larger role in offering input and solutions. Survey students to see if the existing see something, say something reporting mechanism meets their needs. If it doesn't, please include them in figuring out what will. 2nd, please train middle and high school students to know the signs, which there are different versions attached to your copy. When another student is approaching a crisis, Kids know when things are not right among their peers. They are your early warning detection system network. 3, please implement a social inclusion program in all grades to support students who may feel lonely and isolated. Feeling invisible, according to the Violence Project, especially a known contributing factor that, if not addressed, can lead to violence. So I'm committed going forward to helping with any of these ideas. And thank you.
Thank you very much.
Happy to loan it, if anyone's curious.
All right. We are going to call this business meeting to order. Joan, roll call.
Director Hockert?
Here.
Director Kelsenberg?
Here.
Director Petrie?
Here.
Director Portbenny? Director Riley?
Here.
Director Fatava?
Here.
Chair Sherman?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you, Joan. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, our first item of business is approval of tonight's agenda. I'll make the motion to approve the agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Great. Director Hockert, all those in favor of approving tonight's agenda, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. We will start with our superintendent report.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Welcome to you.
Yeah, it's great to be here. I guess the first news in my report is as of July 8th, I am an official resident of the school district with
Welcome.
my wife and youngest daughter, so we're looking forward to that. And my daughter Alex will be a junior at Stillwater High School here in about a month, so
Great.
we're looking forward to that. Been pretty busy for the last few weeks, moving house, selling a house, moving a house, and then, starting as your superintendent up here. So just give you a quick rundown of what's been kind of going on in the last couple of weeks. First of all, I want to thank Melinda. Over the last few months, she's done just a great job with the graceful transition, and really, her and the directors have done a really nice job of helping me be successful. So it's great that we had such a smooth transition there. The second thing that I want to mention is, and I think some people before the meeting saw the slides there, I think this is the first time since I've been a superintendent that I got to participate in a parade. So got to be in the Lumberjack Days Parade, and that was a great experience, and it was really a good introduction to the community and to get to meet folks. And so thanks for that idea, and maybe there'll be more parades in the future here. What I've been doing, and I told the board this a month or so ago, one of my first real initiatives coming into the district is to getting to know people. And so I have a kind of a formalized entry plan where I started really this week meeting with a number of people. Mostly this past week, it's been, at the district level. But I'm going to be expanding it to the wider community. I will be meeting with you board members individually and really trying to get perspective on, what makes Stillwater the great place that it is and how are some opportunities that we can take to improve the district. So that is probably going to be taking up a significant majority of my time over the next 2 or 3 months. At the end of those interviews, I will be coming to the board at a future meeting and providing you feedback on what I've heard. And we can use that as a data point as we start looking at planning for the future and, how to take the great district we have and make it even better. Couple other things. I've been, getting into the schedule with the people at the Central Services Building and finding out the meeting patterns and seeing if we can tweak those at all and really help provide some focus. As the board has seen, we've adjusted how we're updating the board on a weekly basis, and I think that'll help provide more operational information for you as we move forward here. You know, we heard from a speaker tonight about, you know, gun safety and gun prevention and what we can do from really a social emotional perspective as a school district. And, you know, I having come here as a very seasoned superintendent, you know, I'm aware of a lot of proactive strategies, and we had some good ones introduced to us tonight that we as a school district can utilize from a social emotional angle. But I also have 30 years of experience in the military and different security operations. And so we're going to try to address some of the mental health issues up front. At the same time, I have already started to meet with local law enforcement to look at some of their security plans as far as the harder side of keeping people safe. And so I think a proactive approach and a balanced security approach will really help pay the district dividends in the long run here as we really move forward and try to meet the needs of our students and staff and keep everyone safe. So that's real quick, and you know, from the two plus weeks that I've been here, been pretty busy, but I'm really looking forward to it, and I think we've got a really great team of people here in Stillwater. So thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Funk. My report, just a couple things. I too wanted to mention the parade because it was really, really nice to see the community so warmly welcome our new superintendent and just thank the community for just for that goodwill. I know it was hot, but it was a lot of fun. So thank you. And then just, I think, as a whole, as a board, we wanted to officially welcome you. And I know we've all been very excited to have you on board, and just to hear everything you're doing only gets us that much more excited. So it's an exciting time for everyone in the district, and we're looking forward to your leadership. The last, just kind of, or I guess second to the last, we're going to be updating our liaison assignments. So just as a board, as we start approaching the new year, we'll switch those up again, and you might want to start, we'll have those on the website tomorrow, and I'll probably send out an email too, but just to let everyone know to be looking for maybe attend a back to school event, or just kind of be visible in any way you can. And then lastly, I just wanted to kind of, as I was looking, and it's going to be, back to school is an expensive time for families. And so there is this Stuff the Bus. And I just wanted to give a shout out because I know it's been now for a couple years. But it's done through United Way and Community Thread. And so whenever we can thank our local community partners, I just feel like we really need to do that because it's an expensive time of year for a lot of families, and a lot of families need a little extra assistance. So just, again, if it's something that you can donate to, either monetarily or volunteer time, it's communitythreadmn.org or uwwce.org. And thank you to those community partners and the community at large. It's a great program with lots of needs. So that is it. All right, we're going to look for approval on tonight's consent agenda, which is displayed for the community to see, and the board has it in their packet. So if there's no questions, is there a motion to approve tonight's consent? Okay. Did you want to pull something from consent? Okay. What would you like to pull this evening?
D, the policy for community engagement.
Okay. All right, we will pull item D. Is there a motion to approve items A, B, C, E, and F? Director Petrie, in a second?
No, I just want a clarification because what's up there is different on my packet. So did you really, when you said D, are you talking the community engagement one and not the treasurer's report?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, yep. So item D, which is the 201.6, Community Engagement and Public Participation Annual Review. Okay, so we have a motion. Is there a second? Do you want to second that? Okay, Director Kelsenberg. So we are going to be voting on consent agenda, items A, B, C, E, and F. All those in favor of approving? Raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed? Okay, the floor is yours.
I just, when I read through the policy, there's things in that policy that I think really decrease community engagement, and I think we really need to discuss it, because one of the things that happens at the board meeting is people come and they talk to us, but we're not allowed to say anything or ask any questions, and sometimes they have something relevant to something we're voting on, and I think we should be able to ask questions, and I understand that there's a balance between, people disrupting the meeting, you know, not wanting to encourage the disruptions in a meeting, but there's also a problem when someone's saying something that you really have questions about for a vote coming up and you can't ask the questions. So I just think that needs to be looked at better.
Yes.
if I
Yeah,
jump
no,
in?
go ahead,
Sure.
Director Hocker.
Just to kind of give you a little background on this particular policy. This is part of a larger package of community engagement policies that are going to be coming up later tonight, actually, in the report section. This particular policy was it's kind of an older policy that sets the expectation of community engagement for the board and for the district. So it's a really kind of broad policy. There is a separate policy 206 that's going to specifically talk about public participation. So if that is really.
Maybe that's what I was seeing when I had read the packet.
Okay, so that would be a different policy from this one. And the reason this one's on consent is simply because we reviewed it, we had staff review it, and we had no changes to the
Okay,
policy.
I was thinking of the one I saw with all the changes in it. There was the one that was a lot of changes.
Got it, yep, well, we'll definitely discuss that one, for sure. Thanks.
Director Riley?
Could we make sure that when we have things on the consent that it's included? Because that might have helped alleviate any confusion going forward. I don't see this in the packet individually. under
Oh, the actual
consent.
policy?
Yeah, yep.
Oh.
So if it's in the consent, you know how we have the rest of our information available? I think that
Yes, we
probably
can do
would have
that.
helped.
Thanks for bringing that to our attention,
Yeah.
Dr. Riley. That was a minor oversight. I think we usually try to include them. Sorry about that.
Great.
All right, so I withdraw my,
Okay, well,
whatever.
Just move to
do
approve it.
you want to move to approve?
Move to approve.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve item D, policy 201.6, community engagement and public participation, the annual review. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Great. Director Hocker, all those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Great, we'll move on from consent. All right, moving on to action items. Action item A is the district handbook, and that is Carissa. Welcome.
Good evening. Good evening, Board Chair Sherman and members of the board. As you know, at the last board meeting, you had the opportunity to learn a little bit about our district handbook. Every year, we're required to have the board approve it, and then we share that information with our families. There's a lot of important information in there about the expectations, required notices, and we ask our families to review that and then sign off prior to the start of the school year that they have reviewed all that information. So tonight, I'm simply asking for your approval of the handbook. With that approval, then, we will go out and communicate to our families as they come back to school and make that form available for them to sign as well.
Are there any questions? Okay, if seeing none, we can, if someone wants to make a motion, Director Petrie? In a second? Director Vodova? Okay, all those in favor of approving the school district handbook, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, item B tonight is the resolution calling the school district general election, and yes. We're going to put the resolution on the screen, sorry. It's the resolution calling the school district general election and resolution calling special election to fill school board vacancy. This will be a roll call vote. Were there any questions? This is pretty boilerplate and.
Are there two separate resolutions here?
Yes, there
Okay.
are two
So
separate.
then I would suggest you do a roll call for each one of them.
Yes. So this is item. Oh, is it within B? Yes. Okay, we'll do, the first one we'll do for the general election. Okay.
Don't you need a motion?
Yes, we need a motion and then a second, and then we'll do the resolution. So is there a motion to approve? We'll kind of modify that resolution calling the school district for the general election.
So moved.
Okay, Director Hocker, in a second. Director Vodova, okay. Joan, roll call?
Director Huckert,
Yes?
Director Kelsenberg,
Yes.
Director Petrie,
Yes.
Director Riley,
Yes.
Director Fatava,
Yes.
Chair Sherman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. And then the second resolution, kind of handling it separate, is the resolution calling special election to fill school board vacancy. And just for the community, that's not every seat that's available is a 4-year, so that's the 2-year.
I was getting questions on that. I'm glad.
Yeah.
you clarified.
Just so the community knows. Okay, is there a motion to approve? Director Vodova, in a second?
Second.
Okay. Director Petrie? And then Joan, we're ready for the roll call when you are.
Director Huckert,
Yes?
Director Kelsenberg,
Yes.
Director Petrie,
Yes.
Director Riley,
Yes.
Director Fatava,
Yes.
Chair Sherman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. All right, that takes care of action item B. Now we are moving on to action item C, which is another resolution appointing election judges for the November 8th, 2022 school district general election. That's also on the screen for the community. And I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve that, and can I just get a second, please? Director Kelsenberg, thank you. And Joan will do a roll call on that as
Director
well.
Huckert,
Yes.
Director Kelsenberg,
Yes.
Director Petrie,
Yes.
Director Riley,
Yes.
Director Fatava,
Yes.
Chair Sherman.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great.
Can I ask a question about that? Just, we're saying we want election judges, but, doesn't that happen in the general election anyway? I mean, like, how do we set?
It's a procedural, since this is a general election, the county's running it. If it were like last year's election, then we would be, we're going with the county slate, but this is a procedural motion that we have to
We do every
utilize.
year, yeah. Great, okay, we're gonna move on to action item D, which is a renewal of district memberships. And this is for MSBA and AMSD. Why am I not finding it on my? Are there any questions related to this item? Just a kind of an annual, again, renewal of existing memberships that we utilize. Director Riley?
I would actually make a motion to vote on these separately.
Okay, is there a second? Okay. All those in favor of treating these separately, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. We'll go ahead and vote on them separately. All right. The first item then we will vote on is the Minnesota School Boards Association. This is an annual membership for, the services include policy formats, the legal advice, election advice, legislative updates to support school districts, and Board of Election. The total membership fee is $14,674. Any discussion? Yes, Director Riley.
I just want to state that my position on MSB hasn't changed since the last time we've done this, and I believe that we could save that money and use our own legal advice, because following everything MSBA recommends to the T is not making us an independent school district, and we are becoming one unified Minnesota school district, and we really should be following what our community wants, not something an entity that makes money off our district wants instead. So I will be voting no.
Any other comments to add to the discussion? Director Vodova?
I would say that we don't have to follow what they say to a T, but I think they've given us some very valuable advice, and they do have a lot of knowledge, and probably more knowledge than sometimes our own lawyer has, but that doesn't mean we're not subservient to them, and we still can make our independent decisions. And I just find their advice helpful. I thought they were very helpful in helping us with the superintendent search. I find them helpful, I guess.
I think those are other fees that we've paid for, though, on top of this fee.
Yeah, that's true. But, I mean, they're just general advice. I think they've been helpful with training and stuff.
Yes, Director Hoffman.
Just to add into that a little bit, the the policy bank that we use in our policy committee has been invaluably helpful for us to at least have somewhere to start with looking at policies. And they are constantly updating these policies and checking them through their own legal to make sure that they're up to date with our constantly changing laws as well. So I find that the resource is something that we use on pretty much every meeting that we have. And no, we don't adopt everything wholesale. We definitely do review, and we do take their model policies as suggestions. Generally, we have been agreeing to much of what the model policies have presented because it seems to make sense, and it is workable for our district. Excuse me. So I found MSBA super helpful, and I also use them as a resource to contact and talk through some suggestions and approaches to how to modify or change our policies. So I, for one, have used MSBA quite frequently as in the policy committee.
Great. Director Petrie?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with what Director Hocker just said, and also what Director Vadova said. I just find MSBA to be hugely helpful. I just don't feel as though, while I agree with Director Riley that we need to be making decisions that are right for our community, I also think that it's a waste of time to try to reinvent the wheel on every single thing that we do. And so MSBA gives us sort of a baseline, if you will, a knowledge base about running a school district, being a school board. And I would just add that, you know, in addition to the resources that other people have found helpful, one of the things that I find especially helpful, I've been participating in Zoom meetups, if you will, that are facilitated by MSBA and the executive director of MSBA of other school board members in the state. And we are sort of allowed to set our agenda at the beginning of these Zoom meetings every other week. And it's been extremely helpful for me to hear about how other boards are dealing with issues in their districts. This is something that, you know, I wouldn't be able to do if we were not a member of MSBA. And I just have found it really helpful in being the best board member that I can be.
Great. Director Riley?
I'm aware that we've used MSBA for many things. I'm aware of the advice that was given to shut community out of open forums. I'm aware of advice that was given to shut down me as a board member. I'm aware of advice that was given by MSBA that was absolutely incorrect on data privacy. I am also aware that we are not meant to be one unified Minnesota school district. And we do follow their policies that they give us pretty much verbatim. We don't really stray from what it is they offer. And I think it is a failure on a board member's part not to individually do your job and researching and learning. And there is no waste of time. We signed up for this. We knew it was going to be very time consuming, and it's you know, the pay scale for this is minute. It's barely gas money. And so we know that this is a volunteer position for our community, and we sign up for that when we, you know, apply for the election and become elected. And I feel that just throwing it onto somebody else's plate is a failure to do our duties.
Anyone else that would like to add? I think from my standpoint, I find, before we vote here, I'll be supporting this tonight. I find MSBA's services to be invaluable, just as a guidepost, as a starting point, as they have a wealth of resources legislatively, policy-wise, training-wise. We have state mandated training. I would imagine that the expense just to do the training without being a member I think the membership, yes, I would want to maybe crunch some numbers and maybe we can do that as a board, but I think we get a lot of value and a lot of bang for our buck through this membership because we do have training that is required as board members. Director Kelsenberg?
Yeah, I know a lot of times when issues come up, one of the first questions I ask is, what do they do everywhere else? and MSBA is the source for that. If we're gonna make a decision, it's gonna be way different than all the others, that's the first thing I wanna know. And I can't imagine doing that research outside of MSBA, so I will vote for MSBA.
Great, really quick.
I move
Director
to
Voda?
vote on.
I'm not finished. I have another question or additional point. It's not or it's not old information.
Go ahead, Director Riley.
So I know there's been a couple of times things have been brought up about legislative work, and if we have a separate entity such as AMSD doing legislative work, I just feel like some of this is doubling up. So, I mean, at some point, right, I don't know why we need multiple entities to do the same work.
And then I would just like to remind the community too that we did last year scale back. We eliminated a membership with C because we felt that we were getting a lot from AMSD. So it's not, I don't feel like our memberships are excessive, just from my point of view. And I feel like we have as a board scaled back as we can to kind of live within our means and be sensitive to duplication of services. If there aren't any other comments, let's vote on this. Is there a motion? I'll make the motion. Okay,
A motion to vote on
approve
this.
okay, everyone in favor of, well, do we have a motion? I have to go back to this conversation. Do we have
I
a motion to
motion
approve
To approve this.
MSBA?
MSBA.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Director Petrie. Okay, all those in favor of approving the MSBA membership, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Great. Okay, and now we're going to move on to our next association, which is the Association of Metropolitan School Districts, AMSD. The total for that service is $11,322. Is there a motion to approve Association of Metropolitan School Districts?
I'll move.
Great. Director Hockert, I can second that. Any discussion? Great. All those in favor of approving the AMSD membership, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Great. Okay. Now we're going to go on to our, our last resolution of the evening, the 2022-2023 resolution for membership in the Minnesota State High School League. We will put that on the screen for the community to see. It's also in the packet. Again, an annual resolution we pass. Is there a motion to approve? Okay, Director Kelsenberg, in a second. Director Petrie? Okay, any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the resolution for Minnesota State High School League, raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Great. We are moving on to reports this evening. Item A is the transition remodel update. Is Mr. Drummerhausen and guest.
Good evening, Chair Sherman, members of the board, Superintendent Funk. First off, I'd just like to introduce my guests here with me tonight. To my left is Val Peterson, an architect with Wold Architects, John Hunick with Kraus Anderson, and then Caitlin Willis, who's our Assistant Director for Student Support Services. We're here to kind of give you an update of where we are on the Bridge Transitions remodel project. We had at the board meeting on January 6th approved the budget of $3.8 million to remodel the space here at Oak Park for our bridge transitions, and we're ready to go out for bids. We just want to give you an update and kind of show you where we are with pictures and renderings of what that space will look like, and then be open to questions or comments that you may have. So since our last meeting on January 6th, we had user group meetings, which is about 8 to 10 staff members and some of our district admin participated here at Oak Park, which translate to almost all of our transition staff participated in what you're going to see here in the drawings and renderings. We had 6 meetings over 2 to 3 months where we'd have a meeting. We talked about the proposed space that we showed you back on January 6th and things they liked or didn't like, and can we do this, can we do that? And then the architects would go back and they'd say, okay, if we did this, here's what it looked like, and they'd come back to the next meeting and say, oh yeah, we do, no, we don't, and kind of have different versions of that until you end up to where we end up with spaces and going out to bid here in a little bit. Some of the criteria that we used specifically for this project was to create intentionally design space for life skill learning environments for our students, provide a more professional-like atmosphere for our students, create space for social interaction and collaboration, solutions that allow student independence, yet they're supervisable with all of our staff, provide space for sensory, gross motor, and fine motor skill development, and then have space that's close to the parking lot so we can easy access for transportation to their job site or service learning projects. So just a reminder, the space that is in green is the space they were last year, the transition, and the space that's being remodeled. So at the north end of the building is the space that's going to be remodeled. To start the school year and until the space is done, the transition team has moved down to the southern end of the building in that blue space. So they're already moved in right now. So day one, they're going to start in the blue area, and then once the remodel's done, they're going to move back to the green area in the northern part of the building. This is, I'm not going to kind of go over each one of these spaces here, but you can see it's labeled up on the screen and in the board packet of what that remodeled space looks like, and just kind of take you through what the different colors mean so you can kind of get a sense of what that looks like. So the blue spaces are kind of classrooms or designated learning spaces. The green is our collaboration space, which is also learning space as well, but it's more of an open area for our students to collaborate. The yellow area is circulation, or you can kind of think of hallways. The purple is shared space, and the shared space is the gym, which eventually will be shared with ALC if that is something that moves here in the future. The orange area is our staff space or our meeting space. And then lastly, the gray area is our custodial or restrooms or our storage space here in the map in the remodeled area. Now we're just going to kind of take you through real quick just some of the renderings of what this will look like when the project is done. I'm going to turn it over to Val Peterson from Wold just to kind of briefly discuss kind of what you're seeing here in the images.
Good evening. So this image is showing if you were to walk into the door, so immediately ahead of you, you can see a bit of display that the group is planning on using for some of their merchandising offerings. You can see a little bit beyond that into some of that commons area and collaboration area. We want to go to the next slide. And this is kind of looking back towards that front entry. So you can see the new front entry on your left. Also a big thing of this is because students do come and go throughout this program throughout the day for some job skill activities, it also provides seating area, kind of what we've been kind of coining the bus depot. So students can see when their rides come and go and have a sense of security by seeing when it's time to go outside. Here's a view of that life skills kitchen so that they can learn some job skills as well as home skills and work together on meal planning and grocery lists. Another view of that. And here's a view kind of looking down that collaboration area. So again, we're trying to make what is currently right now a corridor with classrooms on both sides to have that aspect of socialization and group work, and also trying to identify when it's appropriate, like with the different materials too, that it's okay to sit here and talk and interact with a staff member or a friend or a peer. A typical classroom view, so there is still a lot of learning that happens, so there's still a lot of, or still some, maybe you'd call it traditional classroom learning. However, in this view, you can see some of that supervision. So there's some additional glass walls so that there can still be supervision in and out. This is the Pays Lab. So the Pays Lab, it has a bunch of work tables for different items as well as workstations. It's showing some blank cabinetry, but there's a lot of storage needs for a lot of those skill building activities. And then here's a home living view. So it's got a small kitchenette area, a small entertaining area, and that actually opens into the Pays Lab too, so there can be some cross teamwork that can happen. Here is one of the things that the group identified that would be a benefit is if their current production lab and clerical lab could interface and interact more than their current layout. So we actually located them next to each other, adjacent to each other, and provide an operable wall. So when it's appropriate, they can open an operable wall and do commingle and do tasks together.
as we look at the schedule, there's kind of three phases when we put one of these projects together. The first phase is the design phase, and then you go to the bidding phase, and then you look at the construction phase. So right now, we just finished the design phase here, and we're kind of bringing what that design looks like, and then we're gonna head into the bidding phase here next in August, and looking for approval in September, and then moving into the construction phase from October through March. And so we'd be looking at the end of March for our transition students to move back into their new spaces that are remodeled here around March, end of March. With that, looking at the budget, we did have 2 reviews of that. I know Kraus Anderson was able to look at the specific drawings and go through and do a budget estimate, as well as our architectural team, do 2 separate budgets to make sure what we're designing fits in with where we are with our bidding process, and they both agree that what you see here on the screen fits into where our budget is. But just a reminder, with this budget and these funding sources, that fixtures and equipment, meaning desk, chairs, those sorts of things are not a part of this. So furniture is not a part of this. This will come separately towards the end of the project. Lastly, we are suggesting to have 2 separate bid packages for this project. We have an early bid project just because of lead times. We want to get out ahead of the game for our hardware and mechanical units, our rooftop units. So we issue drawings on June 30th. We'll be looking to open bids next week on July 26th, and then coming to our finance and ops on August 3rd, and looking for August 11th approval for the early package of hardware and our mechanical units. Then the rest of the bid package would be issued August 4th, with those bids due August 25th, coming to finance and ops on the 31st of August, and looking for board approval on September 8th. So that's kind of a quick highlight view of where we are in the project. And at this time, we'll open up to any questions you have for me or any of the team members that are with us tonight.
Great. Thank you, Mark, for that update. Any questions? Yes, Director Petrie.
I was absolutely delighted to see the drawings of what you are creating. This is so overdue. And just to clarify for the community, the Bridge Transitions Program is a program for 18 to 21-year-olds that we are required to provide. It's for students with disabilities to help give them just a little extra help to transition to the work world, and to allow them to acquire more life skills, to be more successful in life. And so, I mean, again, I was just delighted to see these drawings, and I just kind of wanted to ask Caitlin how she feels about this plan so far.
Well, I just want to thank you all for supporting this project and supporting our students in Stillwater. I'm very grateful. I'm at a loss for words because it's just that exciting. I started here 4.5 years ago and was told, don't unpack my boxes in my office because we're gonna be doing this project. And so to be able to sit here and follow through with this, I'm so grateful, but I'm even more grateful for our students and our families.
Yeah, and just to clarify further, I mean, we have not, unfortunately, we have not really done much of anything to transition the space from being an elementary school to a space that is serving 18 to 21-year-olds who are trying to acquire some life skills. And so more power to you and your staff for providing as good a education that these students have been able to get over the last few years. And I'm very excited to see what the possibilities are going to be once we get finished with this project.
Thank you. We have a wonderful group of teachers and paras, and special educators are great at making the best out of situations and forging kids forward. So I'm very excited to have the opportunity to see all of this come to fruition.
Great. Director Riley.
Thank you. Hi, John. Can you talk to me a little bit about inflation and what you see as these bids start coming in, if you think, or if they come in high? What is the process gonna be? Are we going to reevaluate? Are you gonna come back and ask for more money? Are you gonna stay within budget?
Yeah, good question. And some of you have heard me say this before, these days we are estimating with a smoky crystal ball, right? That the economy is much different than it's been in the past. However, that's part of our job to help predict those costs. I have the budget sheets up in front of me, and we used a cost per square foot that's higher than norm. because of where the economy is. Right now, our prediction is we are on budget. We have that first bid package, which is a fairly decent sized pack. Well, the mechanical equipments are expensive. That will tell us where we're at, along with the hardware. If things happen to go over, I don't think they will, then yes, some value engineering or things will have to be changed to reduce costs. Some like to call it value management. We are carrying a contingency also within our scope. Anytime you do a remodel, you want to carry contingency, so that's on our side also. So we're not planning on value management or engineering, but as of now, we're on budget. You know, and in the economy, I just read some things today. There's some bigger projects, the big warehouses now that are starting to cancel projects. Housing is slowing down a little bit, and we need that. That's gonna help the supply chain, and help prices, so.
How long do they secure their bid for? How long do they guarantee it for?
60 days.
Okay.
That the bids are good for.
All right.
Any other questions? Great, I really appreciate the update. It's great for the community to see this. I'm so excited for the families and for the students. They've been, as Director Petrie said, they've been patiently waiting for this to happen, and it is gonna be a game changer for our transition students. So thank you very much for coming out, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. You're done. You, Mark, are not done. You're gonna stay where you are, and you're gonna provide us and the community with a transportation update.
Good evening again, Chair Sherman, members of the board, and Superintendent Funk.
We didn't know if you were gonna do it with us.
Just to introduce real quick two members of our transportation team from CISO. To my left here is Nikki Pangro, and then next to her is Amanda Whelan here that'll be able to answer questions or comments that we have here at the end. Tonight, we're kind of give an update on our transportation service for next school year. Last spring, we had a lot of conversation about how many routes we're going to be able to run and what that's going to look like. I'm very excited to be here tonight and let you know that in conversations with our bus company and the recruitment of not only drivers but also bus and equipment, that they have secured enough equipment and drivers to run our full 79 routes for our students, which means we are back to our pre-pandemic levels of transportation. So just to remind everybody what that looks like is our elementary students, anybody who lives a half mile from school or farther will be provided transportation for our pre-K through fifth grade students. Our secondary, our 6 through 12 is 1 mile, so anybody who lives more than a mile from their secondary school will be provided transportation. And then gate students will be provided transportation as well if they live more than a mile outside of the Stoughton Middle School boundary. With that, so that's the service that we're gonna be providing. Our elementary and middle school students, so pre-K through 8th grade, are automatically scheduled to ride a bus. So they don't have to sign up. We are going to route all our pre-K through 8th grade students. And then our high school students, 9 through 12, will need to register and sign up. So just kind of a plug out there for the community. If you are a pre-K through 8th grade and you do not want to have transportation, please call our transportation line here at CISO at 651-351-8377. And if you're a high school student or a family of a high school student and you would like to receive transportation, again, please call that same number or email or fill out the form online to get transportation for your students. So real quick, pre-K through 8th, automatically routed for your students, and then high school would need to register for that transportation service. So with that, I will open it up to any questions or comments that we have. Yes?
Just quick question, what does that do to the budget then? What, I mean, where were we at initially, and now with 79 routes, where are we ending up?
So we budgeted for the full 79 routes. When we had the preliminary budget was based off the full 79 routes.
Now, was that $1 million more
So it was
than
about
we were paying?
$1.2 million more than we had planned on with the previous provider.
Thank you.
And then there'll be an additional fuel expense, I believe.
Correct, based on where fuel prices are.
You know, like, just per, like, I don't know, 50 cents fuel increase from, I think it was like $3.85 or something in the contract, something like that. How do we know how much it's gonna cost us as the fuel prices fluctuate?
Did we end up at 370?
There's an escalator clause in the contract. I don't recall it off the top of my head.
I know there is, yeah, that's why I was
And-
wondering.
And
but-
so it's got, there's a share feature in there. So you guys might be able to.
I can pull it up, I just need to be on my phone.
Okay, but we don't have to do it right now, I just think we should be aware.
Yeah, we can get back to you on that.
It's gonna be in our budget that
Yep.
we'll need that
Correct.
to
For
just
sure.
know where we're at.
Yes, Director Hocker.
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to Schmitty and Sons for finding enough bus drivers and buses to complete all these routes. I know that there were a lot of gate families that were really frustrated and nervous about keeping their kids in the program, especially from the southern part of the district. So I know that there's a lot of appreciation from those families, as well as our elementary students who are going to be bused and the middle and high school kids. So thank you to our new contractor for doing the hard work of getting us up to speed. So much appreciated.
Yes, Director Kelsenberg.
Yeah, with the opt-in, so first the pre-K through 8, if they never ride the bus, they're still gonna have bus service scheduled, right? Now, the high school kids can opt in or opt out. Can they switch that opt-in, opt-out throughout the year if their car breaks down or they change their mind?
Yes.
Okay. And if, I believe there's a rule, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that if the student doesn't ride for 10 days in a row, then the driver can roll by their stop. Will they have that ride always available to them, even if they never use it? Also, I mean, no, they take it in case they need it? Okay.
Yep, so I can say typically if a student does a ride for 10 days and it's brought to our attention, we will not remove a student from a route before contacting the family to find out, are they planning, like, a lot of families, I understand, they like to have that option. They might need it one morning where they typically don't. So we will never just remove a student from the bus without contacting the family first.
Okay, but let's say Jack gets his driver's license in December, now he's not gonna use the bus anymore. Do we take a proactive step? And he's just gonna not ride, and we don't know that. Do we take a proactive step to reach out and say, hey, you haven't been on the bus for 15 days, or do you wanna opt out? Just make things more efficient?
Correct, if it's brought to our attention, they said, if a driver submits to us, you know, their quote-unquote dead stops, we will reach out to the family and inquire with them if they still need that service.
Yes, Director Vodova.
I thought we were paying for software that was going to track which kids were getting on the bus specifically so we could make our routes more efficient. So how are we using that software if, like, I just wanna know how that's gonna work, because why, you know, we're paying for the software. I think it's important that we use it to, like, increase our, like, even, I think it was like $35,000 or something for the software, and each bus route was like $74,000 or something. So even if we decrease one route based on the software, then we should be able to more than pay for the software. So how are we using that to do that?
And I think to, like what we're hearing, and we had this at that work session, and so I think that between the operations side and Dr. Funk, I think there is a great amount of interest on the board to find efficiencies where we can in transportation. I don't want to I know that you didn't come prepared to answer probably all of these other ancillary questions other than to provide an update. So we can decide if we need to have a further update or a work session. But I know we do have some, that grant software that maybe, our hope, I think, at that work session was that we want to try to find efficiencies, educate families that by not signing up, it's not meaning that they can never sign up. They can always get back on relatively easily, but it can save money. And so obviously, with everything that happened with our transportation, we are paying more. But we needed to do that to have service, reliable service for our families and for our students. So I think that we're just always interested in that. And I think that's what you're hearing today, is just really kind of budgeting for what those gas prices are going to be, looking for those efficiencies. And maybe a report back to the board if we decide that we want that, or I don't know. So if you can answer anything here, I just don't want to put you on the spot where.
There's different features to that. I mean, the first one is providing GPS for our buses, which we want to have. And so that technology allows us to do that, so we can track, where parents can have the app on their phone and be able to track their GPS. Another feature of that we can roll out day one is to have the turn-by-turn directions for our drivers. So instead of using the paper, they'll have a tablet to use that to help with safety within our buses. Those are two things at the start of the school that we can be able to hit the ground running on. Other features that it allows us to do, and we need to talk about implementation phase, is a kind of on and off badging system, or kind of what we want that to look like. There's also a pre and post-trip tracker that the transportation company can use if they want to use that or some other thing. So there are 5 or 6 different features that that program allows. And so we're putting together an implementation phase of what's going to be up and running day one, and then what we want to phase into as the year goes on.
Great. Any other questions? Thank you very much for the update. Great news for families to hear that we're fully functional, and I've heard really good things about our Schmitty, so I'm very excited.
Oh, one more question.
Oh, yes.
That includes gate, right? Because we got a lot of feedback
Yes.
on gate.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry. Pay attention, okay.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you. All right, on to item C, first reading. Policy 206, public participation in school board meetings and data privacy considerations, and it's Dr. Cherry.
All right, good evening, Board Chair Sherman, Board Directors. We have a couple of policies to talk about tonight. The first one is a first reading of Policy 206, and I believe this is the policy that Director Vodova was referring to earlier this evening. The series of policies we're going to be talking about tonight, the review of these policies by the policy working group actually began almost a year ago. It's been quite a while. We had a work session with the board in December, and have had a lot of discussion about all of the details of the policies we're talking about tonight. What we want to do first is review Policy 206. There are significant revisions, and I want to give a little bit of context behind this. Public participation in school board meetings, there is a model policy that is provided by the Minnesota School Board Association. And in their policy, there is an addition of also data privacy considerations that go along with this. In addition to that, the MSBA suggests an annual review of this policy along with all of your school board or 200 series policies. So some of the significant additions, along with the data privacy considerations, is an entire section on definitions. And so that's the first part that you'll notice. That's new. And the rights to privacy. As we move forward in Section 5, the public's opportunity to be heard, the policy working group had a lot of discussion around this statement that was in our policy that stated among the rights available to the public is the right to access public data. This is part of our Minnesota Government Data Practices Act. That is true, but it also is inclusive in Policy 722, which is specific to public data requests. And so that's why the recommendation from the policy working group is to remove that from this section of this policy here. Going on or moving forward, also updating some of the procedures to general guidelines and ensuring that there is just a little bit more information on the persons who wish to address the school board on a particular subject should identify that subject and identify the agenda items to which their comments pertain. Under this section, also adding information about complaints. So complaints sometimes come up in public comment period, and so we wanted to ensure that this information was included on how to address complaints in a way that will be efficiently and efficient way to resolve those types, to hear those complaints and resolve them. Moving forward, just the clarification that no board action would occur at the same meeting that it's brought up at by the public. And so if something's brought up in the public comment period, the school board wouldn't take action at that same meeting, but would take it under advisement and then perhaps add it as a future agenda item. And then the last section, the penalties for violation of data privacy, is fairly significant. And again, that explains the ad that I discussed earlier, in that there are some pretty serious consequences about violating the privacy rights for our students and our staff. And so we wanted to make sure that that piece of it was included. And I will just mention that that piece of the policy proposal of revisions comes directly from the MSBA model policy. And so with that, I think that Director Hockert might have some additional detail, but this is a first reading. We would seek some additional discussion, some comments from all of the board directors and any public that might be interested in weighing in, with the anticipation that we would come back for a second reading at a future meeting.
Could we
Director
could we
Hockert?
put the policy up?
Yes, Director Hockert has the floor.
Sure, just thank you, Dr. Cherry. That was very thorough. I wanted to weigh in just a little bit of history on this particular policy. This policy was adopted in 2018. Obviously, we've had open forum or public comment long before 2018. So before that point, it was covered in another policy, 201.3, which is a policy that you're going to be seeing in just a few minutes. So I just kind of wanted to make those connections, that it's been on the books for a while. When it originally was adopted in 2018, the board, or the policy committee, decided to kind of skinny up this policy. And these additions that Dr. Cherry has highlighted were in the model policy at that time. And at our board decided to kind of really keep this policy just focused on open forum. So they did take out all of these elements that we are requesting to add back in. And part of the rationale, I reached out to some former board members to kind of understand why. Really, it was to simplify, and there was an understanding that some of this information was in another policy, which is 406. However, that is under kind of staff policies, so they didn't want it to be redundant. However, these personnel data privacy laws do apply to everybody in the district, in the board needs to follow these laws, as well as the public. And in discussions, we figured the public wouldn't necessarily know to go look to 206. 406, thank you. Keep all these numbers in line in my head. To know that that applied in this situation. So for us, it felt like it was a necessary step to kind of bring these to the attention of the public and to the attention of the staff, hopefully already know about this, and the board as well. So it's important that we do follow these data privacy laws and hold people who are coming to speak to us at the board table accountable for those laws as well. So this is kind of an attempt to get everybody back on the same page so that we all understand it and are kind of working from the same information. So that's why we decided to go back to what the model policy was advising for this particular policy.
Thank you, Joe.
Oh, good. We've got it up now. I think Jennifer did a great job in kind of highlighting the few sections that we did add back. And I guess I'd like to open it up for questions, comments, thoughts from board members as we continue our first reading.
Yes, Director Riley?
Can I just go to 206-3 page, it is 6 under general guidelines, and it is number 1. You have the citizen, and I just, for consistency, probably should change that to persons.
Thank you.
Find it? Okay.
Oh, got it, yep.
Director Vodova?
Under the general guidelines, I understand that they don't want people to maybe say their address, but it would be useful to understand what, like, elementary school zone they're in, or something to, like, give you context of where their main concerns might lie. I don't know how you would do that, but.
I know when I attended some training, they really, MSB is really advising against making anyone kind of identify where they live or what town, that if they want to bring it forward on their own accord, that's permissible, but that it would not be advisable. Do you have something to add?
I just wanted to clarify in this one here. This is about if a individual is interested in placing something on the agenda. at a board meeting. And so this indicates that that person should reach out to the superintendent to request that item. And so we did cross out address based on that recommendation, but I think an add here might be contact information so the superintendent could reach back out to that individual and ask for any clarifying questions.
Yes, Director Kelsenberg.
Yep, since we got that section right there, and you changed citizens to persons, is there any identification that the person is a district resident or not? And does that change any of their ability to speak to the board?
Just to clarity again, this is about an individual who is interested in placing something on the school board agenda at a meeting. This is not about an individual who wants to speak at the meeting. That's the section here on public comment.
Okay.
I'll ask the same question then when we get to that paragraph.
Well, there shouldn't be citizens again, I guess, persons or whatever. I'm using.
So this is just a first read, as you've been told. So if, after reviewing the policy, I know that the kind of protocol would just be to reach out to Katie and Dr. Cherry or anyone in the, else in the policy group, and then with that feedback to kind of keep this moving. Great. Any other comments for this first read? You'll see it again. And again, email anything else.
Can I
Yes.
just make another comment? So Director Kelsenberg just made I think an excellent, he had a question that was a really, I think, important clarification. In that, who can speak at a public comment period? Must that individual be a resident? Must they be a parent? Is it important for the board to understand or know that information, and do we collect that information in any way? The way that the policy is written here is it doesn't get into that level of detail. It just indicates here, this is the same language that's in the current policy, is that it's a citizen may address the board. And so we do have in our current practices a way that we collect that information when someone signs up to speak. But that's, I think, exactly the kind of feedback that would be helpful for the policy working group to consider.
Director Petrie.
I just want to circle back around to something that Director Vadavas mentioned earlier, and that is the whole concept about being able to respond to people who speak to us at open forum or ask questions and all that sort of thing. And I know that this is the way we do it is very common. I think that this is advice that we got from our attorney, but I do think that when we go and address this in our next policy meeting, that it might be helpful for us to be able to clarify why we do what we do, and bring that information back to the board for a second reading.
Could you scroll a little further, Joan?
And
Can I clarify just
yes,
what Bev said?
yes, absolutely. Go ahead.
So some of you have probably heard this before. The school board is a meeting that is held in the public. It is not a public meeting. So you are meeting, you are choosing at some point in the meeting to hear comments from the public, but it is your meeting held in the public that is, it's not a public meeting, so there's not, equal participation. So I think that's just a key.
That makes sense.
Director Riley.
Couple of things, I agree with that. We have very many opportunities to meet outside of a board meeting and engage with our community. I think a board meeting is a time to get it on public record and to make sure everybody is attentive, everybody's listening, and the community maybe can hear too if somebody else has concerns. I don't like the idea of limiting who can and cannot speak at a meeting. I'm sorry, I'm supposed to direct my words to you. We all pay taxes, state, federal, whatever. And the schools are all of us, their community. And so I don't want to see us now trying to limit who can and cannot come before the board to express concerns, happiness, frustrations. I mean, it goes on all ends of the spectrum. So I just want to be as transparent and welcoming to the entire community and outside the community.
And I guess from my point, I mean, I'll certainly email any feedback. I do appreciate kind of looking into the why we do it. But I know that there are other ways to engage. And one was earlier with our liaisons. I mean, certainly getting out into the community that way. People can email, people can meet. And so I know, exactly, public comment is important, but I don't think, we do a very good, I think we know people know in advance that this is not a dialogue, that it's a chance to kind of come in and maybe bring some attention to something that can further business discussion at a later time. And so, I have found it appropriate. I know several years ago now, we did have like more of a conversation hour where there was more resolution. And it really wasn't very satisfying for the community, I guess, is what, it went away. And so maybe it's something that we can be working with the community, asking where they find those touch points most meaningful. I'm not necessarily sure that it needs to be at a business meeting. That's kind of my take. But I mean, I appreciate the discussion and dialogue by policy and everyone's attention on this. And certainly if the community wants to reach out, this is a great time to reach out to board members with their feedback. So. Any other comments?
Can I throw one
Yeah.
final thing in that I forgot to mention earlier? Just kind of for everybody's benefit. We did have a work session back in December to kind of talk about, and some of these topics are bubbling back up for discussion. And we definitely, as a policy group, have looked at a lot of the suggestions that came in. And I did create like a quick little summary of some of those suggestions that have been implemented. These are all things that are really procedural, either the staff is already doing or things that were minor adjustments, like leaving the open form sign up open until 15 minutes before a board meeting. That was something that was requested, and that was implemented pretty quickly after that work session. So we definitely have been slowly taking feedback and having these discussions about how much feedback do we give to people, what kind of, do we want a listening session, do we not want a listening session? So there is definitely a lot of thought going into this, and we really would like to focus on kind of setting that policy, and then as we're setting these policies, continue that discussion of how do we want the procedure to kind of fall into place going forward along with this policy. So that's all I've got on this one.
Great. All right, we'll move on, seeing no other comments. We will go to policy 207, first reading, public hearings. And Dr. Cherry.
All right, I'm back at it. Policy 207 is on public hearings, and we can think of public hearings as a way of public participation in school board meetings, but it's very specific. And so these are public hearings that are required by law to be held in certain circumstances. So for an example, we hold a truth in taxation meeting, and along with that is an opportunity for the public to speak. And so that's the type of activity that's covered here in this policy. Again, a suggestion to move this to an annual review, just like the previous policy that we had discussed. And then with that, the couple of notations that you see on the front end here in the first couple of sections are grammatical in nature, really not substantive. And the pieces that are clarifying, I think, are at the tail end of the policy under section C, 3C, public participation. And numbers 1 through 6 are kind of a reformatted way of saying what was previously there in numbers 1 through 7. But again, it reiterates some of those, guidelines, per se, on how to hold a public hearing. And so with that, we're proposing this as a first read. We would welcome any comments, feedback from board directors, and again, from the community. And we would anticipate that we'd bring this back for a second read at a future meeting.
Great. Again, if anyone has any comments, we can share them now, or we can email them directly to the policy chair, Katie, and Dr. Cherry. Are there any comments immediately?
I have one. This privilege to speak, that a school board member should direct remarks or questions through the chair, and only those speakers recognized by the chair will be allowed to speak. I don't agree with that. That's, I think, like shuts down discussion. It gives too much veto power to the chair, and I absolutely don't agree with that.
Can I clarify that? So that particular information is coming from like Robert's rules, that we are already following according to our policy Robert's rules, and that is kind of more formal in how we are supposed to be conducting our business as a board. Now, obviously, sometimes we're more strict, sometimes we're more relaxed, but this was the recommendation to better align with our other
MSBA.
policy. Sorry, what was that?
I said MSBA.
No, I
This
think
is
it's
for
our own
public
policy.
meetings. This
Robert's.
isn't
Yes.
for, this is for public meetings. It's not for a school board meeting, like, per se. Like truth and taxation, you were saying that meeting isn't a school board business meeting.
At the beginning of it's a requirement on our truth and taxation hearing. There's a formal requirement that there be a hearing before the meeting. So what this policy codifies is the board's procedures for the formal hearings, that they're different than the open forums. So you may have, I mean, they may be very similar in nature, but this is your policy for your formal hearings.
But again, I don't agree with that privilege to speak line, because I've found that sometimes you're not given a privilege to speak. I don't agree with that.
Dr. Riley has a question.
Dr. Riley?
Yep.
Yeah, and I am number 6, limit participation. I just don't like the vagueness of right to impose such other limitations or restrictions as necessary. I just would like things to be clearly laid out, and that's just too vague. So I think I wouldn't be in favor of having a policy that is very vague, and if it's got to be vague, then I just don't think we should have it.
Would that be, just to ask, policy, would that be the limits on participation, like if the room was full, you would ask for, I mean, I'm just making this up, like district residents? You would want to give district residents priority, or is that what that's getting at, or?
So I'll just, do you mind if I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Jump in. So in our current policy, it does indicate a time limit. Each individual would have up to 5 minutes to address the school board. That's a rule that I don't believe has been followed, at least since I've been here the last 2 years. What we've done is we've allowed individuals to speak for longer periods of time actually more than 3 minutes during public hearings. It's, I think, been open.
Yes.
And so this rule hasn't been implemented. But what the revised proposed policy indicates is that based on the circumstances during any given public hearing, based on the number of individuals that are wishing to speak, and if there are any time constraints and how much time the school board has to hear, there may be a need to propose some limitations, and that you would have, as a board, the opportunity to make that decision just in time.
Director Riley?
I understand the desire to have that. I've just seen the abuse of, not at this particular meeting, but I've seen the abuse of power when it comes to open forum or public speaking. And so I really am not on board with having something vague.
Go ahead, Dr. Funk.
Could you, help me out. I know you have for your open forum, what,
3
15?
minutes.
15?
3 minutes per speaker. 15.
Okay.
15
You-
speakers.
You could, this is just a suggestion, all right, you could put something similar to that with the caveat, allowing the board flexibility to increase.
Director Riley?
I would appreciate it if it was laid out in such circumstances. And because the other reason I believe that's valuable is I think it's important for the community to know what they can expect. Because a lot of community members put a lot of time and effort into preparing to speak to the board and to public. It's nerve-wracking for many people. And I think it is important for us to have very clear guidelines and expectations.
So is this public hearing or public, or
Can I-
board?
can I
I thought
clarify
this
that?
was,
Yeah.
yes, go ahead, please.
I'll quick clarify that, which is something that came up right away in our policy meeting, that these seem very similar. Just to clarify, 206 covers our public comment, which is, at a board meeting, and it is not a requirement of the law. That we are basically, and we have as a tradition, opened up our board meetings to have a public comment session so that community members at all of our regular business meetings can come and speak to us directly, but that's not a requirement of the law. This second policy, 207, is specifically about public hearings. There are certain instances where we are required by law to hold a public hearing, and that's kind of.
Truth and taxation.
Yes, truth and taxation is one of them. So it's a second separate policy for this legal requirement. And it kind of, we are trying to lay out and figure out how much we want to put in there versus what we need as a procedural element. Because with our 206, we were having the same discussion of what goes in policy versus procedure. And this one, as we're kind of wading into that same territory, is how much specifics do we put in this policy versus have a separate procedural document. And the feedback that I'm getting right now from Director Riley is that you want more procedural information in 207 to make it more specific. Just to throw it out there, would it be acceptable to do a procedural document that would go along with this policy to have that level of specificity, but then also kind of give the board a little more flexibility without having to fully review a policy in order to make those changes? Just kind of throwing that out there to see if that would be acceptable.
Did you have something to add to this, and then Director Riley?
Right,
or-
I did have something.
Okay.
I
Director
just wanted to
Petrie, and then
add
I'll go to you, Director Riley.
that one of the things that we have been dealing with in the work of the policy committee is trying to make distinguish between a policy and a procedure. And so policies are supposed to be sort of a high-level idea about what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and then the procedure is something that tells you exactly how you're supposed to do it. And so in this case, I appreciate the fact that we have some flexibility in this particular policy because, for instance, if we have a truth and taxation meeting and we have one person who wants to speak, we're not going to place a hard and fast limit on that one person. But if, for instance, we are going to close a school and we have 300 people who show up, all of whom want to speak to us, we can't be there for 10 or 12 hours. And so in that case, in order to allow as many people who want to speak, we might set a 2-minute limit on it. But those are two very vastly different situations, and our policy, I believe, should give us the flexibility to be able to create the right circumstances for the situation.
Director Riley?
So I don't like the vagueness of it because I've watched the abuse of public that have tried to come, and we shouldn't close good schools that don't need to be closed. But besides that piece of it, when you're gonna take such an action, you should expect to listen and expect to hear. But the community needs to know what the expectations are coming in the door, and I don't think, we witnessed it during the COVID, we witnessed it during the shutdowns, we witnessed, people being shut out of speaking, and I just think it's important to have everything laid out. If you want to have a procedural manual, then maybe this should refer to the manual, so people know where to go, because people do go through our policies, people do read what the expectations are. And again, I know the difference between this policy and open forum, but people still prepare, and it's still nerve-wracking, and they deserve to know what they're walking into.
And I think we've talked about that as we're creating broad policies with procedures underneath, that it would be very easy just on the website to link to the procedures that are established. So, okay, I do agree with that.
I also think if we have some public hearing, it's not reasonable to have people just talk for hours, right? It's very much more like you could put it as part of your procedure that, you know, given a contentious subject, that perhaps we could have 5 for and 5 against with a limit of, you know, a certain amount. Like, I mean, there's different ways to control things and not still have everyone be able to talk, or everyone, you know, all the viewpoints be able to be heard, but not shut down and not let, you know, people talk. But, yeah, I think it would be fine if we mentioned where you could find out what the actual procedure was, or have at least say like a minimum of this much time will be provided for public comment.
And I'm trying to think of public hearings, to be honest, they're infrequent.
Yeah.
And they do differ in the way that, depending on what it is and the purpose. So it is a challenge to write procedures because they're all very different. So, and we do know about these in advance. You know, it's a good topic for policy discussion. I need to think about it too, and I can email my thoughts.
Yeah.
But I do agree that a procedure document, and I do agree that policies in general are meant to be more broad and flexible with the procedures that are, you know, but the procedure should be immediately accessible to the public as well, so. Great, good. Okay, again, to email both Dr. Cherry and Director Hocker with any kind of comments on that public hearings. Again, not to be confused with public comment at a board meeting, but public hearings policy, so. All right, and then now we're going to talk about policy 201.3, operating norms, and you're going to stay right where you are, Dr. Cherry.
Thank you, Chair Sherman, Board Directors. This is another one. We've been talking about policy 201.3 for a long time. The reason why it keeps coming up is because it overlaps with so many of our other policies in the 200 series. And as we've been reviewing all of these policies for the last year, this one has come up many, many times. In some sections, it's redundant and it says the same thing in a current policy. And in some sections, it is in conflict with current policy. And so I'll just give a brief overview of the various sections of this policy and the other policies that we have on the books right now, where it crosses over. So our operating norms policy, section 1, is similar to policy 201, which is the legal status of the school board. Section 2 is related to policy 202, which is our school board officers. And then there's a large section here, section 3, 4, 5, and section 6 is redundant with policy 209, which is our code of conduct policy. As we move forward into section 7, this is how we conduct our meetings. This is also included in policy 205, our open and closed meetings policy. Policy 202 in school board officers. Again, policy 205 on open and closed meetings. And while we were reviewing this, we actually saw that there was some duplication, and I think this maybe was a formatting error, but in section 7.7, right after that, there is pointing back to section 7.2 again. And so it just, again, lots of old stuff in here. If we get down to section 7.10, this is 203, operation of the school board governing rules. If we move on to section 7.11, this is 203.5, our school board meeting agenda. once we get to section 7.13, this is the policy we just talked about, the first policy we talked about tonight, which is 206, public participation in a school board meeting. I just want to call out in this section, we have a portion of this, it's very procedural, and it indicates information that includes that how individuals can sign up at the meeting. It includes information that 12 speakers, up to 12 speakers could speak for a maximum of 5 minutes. So again, these are all things that we're not currently doing and is in conflict with our current procedures. All of that is covered in 206. And then moving on, section 7.14 is equivalent to 204, our school board meeting minutes. So as you can see, there's a lot in this policy and probably tells you why in 2018, when the last school board policy working group was passing a lot of the 200 series policies and doing the revisions at that time, they didn't revoke this one because it just overlaps with everything. And so we at this time are recommending that we would revoke policy 201.3 because the topics are covered in other policies that you currently have on your books. So we would be open to any, it looks like Director Huckert has some more background.
One more thing to add. So the policies that are listed on here, all of them except for 209 have been reviewed in like the last 6 months. So these are all things that we have been looking at these policies and updating them. 209 is still definitely on the books, but we have, just so that we all know, we are hopefully well familiar with all of the overlap and have been reviewing those. And we do plan to review 209 as well, and it'll stand until we do that review. So we felt comfortable bringing it forward at this time with the recommendation to revoke it. And it would be tied into this policy package, so it would continue along with 206, so that once that is passed, then that would, and 207, 206 and 207, then we would bring it up for revocation at that third reading.
We actually checked with legal yesterday on this. You guys can revoke it at any time. You don't have to, so we can revoke it next. It's not on the agenda tonight to revoke, but you can actually revoke it at your next meeting.
So unless anyone has, if anyone wants to read it again because they don't agree with the revocation, we can do that. But yes, we can definitely add this to the agenda as a revocation action item for the next meeting. Were there any comments? Director Riley?
I would just like to say hallelujah. It's about time that we are finally getting rid of an unconstitutional policy. It only took, what, a year and a half?
Yeah, it's been on the books for a long time.
You actually could, if you wanted to, make a motion to amend the agenda right now, and then you could revoke it tonight. So it would take a 2/3 majority of the board to do that. That's just a suggestion.
All right. Hang on, just one thought on that. I would be a little hesitant in that, in just that this has been a policy on the books for a long time, and I would like to allow the public to just fill in, or just have the public have an opportunity to weigh in on this if they would so choose. And then if you would like, we could bring it forward at the next meeting. At least that's my 2 cents on where I'd weigh in. However, I will defer to the will of the board.
Well, and I know that this has been on the books for a long time and it wasn't revoked by the last board. And maybe there are reasons why that people will come out and say why it wasn't revoked and prior, but.
I would like to say that it seems like everything in it is redundant, and there's stuff in it that's inaccurate. And if we want to bring it back, we can, but it seems to make sense to amend the agenda and.
Would you like to make a motion to amend?
Yes,
the
I
agenda?
make a motion to amend the agenda so we
second.
can revoke this policy.
Okay, all those in favor of amending the agenda, raise your hand and say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay. What happens then?
Motion does not pass. So we'll just put it on the agenda for the next meeting, give the public time to weigh in, and we'll put it on the agenda for a revocation action item at the next meeting. Great. And again, if the community does want to weigh in, to send that information to the board with that feedback as well as the board itself. Great. Thank you. All right, last item is the board self-evaluation. And I sent an email to the board earlier in the week, and I just put together, just a brief presentation here, and we can just kind of fly through this. But why, just more for the community, why do we conduct school board self-evaluations? And pretty obvious, but professional development is important, even for a school board. It moves us towards becoming a high-performance board. Majority of us have been, I don't think anyone here is serving a second term, let alone, most of us here are under 2 years. So a relatively new board. It promotes continuous improvement to help the board become more effective in its role within the district in governance and oversight. We can definitely identify opportunities for learning, for growth, and future development. It helps build a stronger superintendent board team, which I think with coming in with Superintendent Funk is increasingly important and valuable. Results can help identify, we can use those results to help identify board-specific goals that we do annually, and just kind of help identify those areas for improvement. And then it also does celebrate what the board is doing well, and that's important to take the time to do that as well. The board evaluation, which I shared a copy with you, it's based on 5 standards, and that is the conduct and ethics, the vision, structure, accountability, and advocacy. And I sent you kind of all the documentation of those standards and kind of what's underneath every standard there. And there are 2 options that are provided for this service. And one is exactly what you're looking at right now, and I sent that to you as well. It's just a 1-page document. It's not kind of aggregated by the questions, because the survey itself is about 72 questions based on the standards that we are accountable to. And so this would be just a 1-page document, no cost. It's just not available by the individual question. So we're not going to get a lot of granular detail. And then no professional facilitation, which, no professional facilitation. But again, no cost. The next page identifies option 2, which is a 27-page report. And it is, you do get detail from answers based on the individual question. So we will get to identify all 72 questions. And how our board kind of rates itself as a collective. Again, this is not individual board director evaluations because we operate as a collective. So it's all based on how we think we're doing as a collective board. There is a professionally guided discussion. So any areas that come up that maybe are identified for improvement, there's a facilitation that can take place just to kind of walk us through and be an impartial facilitator. That is about a 2 to 3 hour in-service. And if it exceeds that 3 hours, there's no additional cost to that if we kind of come across a stumbling block that needs some more attention. The last one is just, there's assistance in identifying possible board superintendent goals. So sometimes that outside eye might provide us some food for thought. The cost is $995. Broken out, I just broke out the cost by board director at $125 each, and that would include the superintendent in that cost breakout, so by 8. And then the cost per student, because really this professional development, from my perspective, is to make us a high-performing board that is going to benefit our students by making us better at what we're elected to do. So the cost per student, 13 cents. So sent you all the information. I think next steps, if we could just go, is just kind of, I really wanted to answer any questions to the best of my ability, have a board discussion, and then just really what I'm looking for tonight is our board's preference so that I can move forward on one of these 2 options so that we can get this started.
I would like to ask, raise your hand.
Yeah, Director Vodova.
I would like to ask the superintendent what he thinks of this and if he thinks we should, well, the free one is pretty, obviously might as well do the free one, but if he thinks it's worthwhile or not. And if maybe he has other ideas on how he thinks the board could work better together with him.
I have gone through the process with the free one. I have not gone through the process with the paid one yet. But having said that, the more information I can get coming in and understand perspectives on how you operate and challenges that, and successes that you had as a board would be beneficial to me.
Great. Director Riley?
I am adamantly against spending a dime on this. We have done self-evaluations since I started on the board, and they have not cost us anything. So I am not interested in spending more money on MSBA for services that I believe are unnecessary when this is something we can do on our own.
And I actually did go back and look, just for knowledge, I did go back and look at what past boards have done. And it was done by the board itself. But I will have to say, when I was watching those public meetings, there wasn't a lot of discussion. It was, one of the comments I think that stood out was, we rate ourselves better than we rate individual. They were rating themselves and then rating the board. And people universally were rating their own individual performance better than the board. But really, the conversation and the discussion didn't go deep. It wasn't discussed by the board, in a public setting. So yeah, I personally didn't find it to be something that, watching it from a community member's perspective, and I'll let Director Riley share her experience, because on one of them, she was on the, with a previous board. But there were issues that didn't get resolved, so it didn't really move the board to a better place from my perspective when I watched the meeting back again. Director Riley?
I feel like that is the board leadership, and that is who is handling the leadership at the moment. I think you can do that without having to pay somebody to do it if you ask the questions, and that's the desire. That was just never the direction or the desire of the person who was handling, or the chair that was handling that at the moment. I don't know that we need to pay for that.
Okay. Director Petrie?
I am in favor of the paid version. And the reason I say that is that I think that we are at a bit of an inflection point right now. We have a new superintendent who is seeking to understand how we work so that he can work as well as possible with us. Also, we are a new board. I feel as though and I've been involved in a lot of different situations in which an examination has been led by a board chair, and also an examination has been led by an outside consultant. And pretty much in every situation, the outside consultant produces a better outcome. And that's because they don't have any, they don't have a stake in it, right? They are experienced in being able to ask the right questions, and get the participants to come to a higher level discussion than what could be achieved by just a board chair trying to ask some questions. Sometimes it just is a good idea to pay for expertise if you want to get a better outcome. And I think that we are in a position right now where, because we have a new superintendent, this is something that we need to go a little bit deeper in terms of our evaluation, because it also is going to set the table for us to set our own board goals and work together better in the future. So I would be in favor of the paid version. I really just don't think it's that much money for a facilitated session to help us work better together.
Director Hocker?
Thank you. Just to kind of echo some of Director Petrie's comments, I also am in favor of doing the facilitated session, evaluation and session. I think that we are kind of starting a new chapter, and if Dr. Funk thinks that he's going to be getting some good information, I would want to support that, and allowing us to dig into successes and improvement areas for us as a board. And I like the idea of having a facilitator come in so that all members of the board can fully participate. I feel like if we have a chair trying to facilitate and participate, that can kind of get a little tricky for the person trying to do both jobs. So I think that one other point, I really believe in professional development, and I feel like this is an opportunity for us as a board to set the tone for the whole district. And we are expecting our teachers and our staff to participate in professional development and constantly improve their own skills to become the most effective educators in this district. And I hope that we could set the tone that we need to be the most effective board leading this district. So I do support this. The option 2 for the board evaluation with the facilitator.
Great. Director Kelsenberg, and then I'll come to you,
Yeah,
Director Riley.
2 parts. One is, how often would you normally do this? Yearly?
It's ideally once a year. It doesn't, based on the history that when I was kind of looking for things, it hasn't been done consistently on an annual basis. But it's an annual activity.
Okay, and then, so before the meeting, just reviewing this, I was ready to come in and argue, don't spend the money because we're gonna have an election, and then do it with the new, whatever the new board may be. But the key variable is, we got a new superintendent, he doesn't know us, and he really doesn't know our as much as he might wanna know. So I think if he wants it, I'm for it. I'm for
And I will
spending.
say, I did ask that of the facilitator when I was talking through these options. And that wasn't really a concern because this information is public. The discussion is public, and so certainly if there was an election and seats turned over and people were running, it's information that would be valuable for anyone coming into the role in terms of strengths, opportunities for growth, weaknesses, that sort of thing. So great questions, thank you. Director Riley?
I just wanted to echo the fact that we have an election coming up and this board would be turning over. When does it stop? When does the spending stop? I mean, honestly, this board does nothing for itself. We have to lean on every other entity to lay everything out for us. I don't even know why we're here, because everything we do is dependent upon MSBA. This board, MSBA this, MSBA that, we do nothing for ourselves. I disagree the fact that he needs this to be able to understand how to move forward. I think the most beneficial thing that he will have is when he has our meetings and when we have good conversation and he understands perspectives of everybody on this board and within his department. This is not going to be the tool to help him figure out how to run. And like I said, honestly, this just needs to stop. At some point, we need to take control of our own board.
I also did contact other districts, just so the board is aware on our behalf to talk to other districts who have gone through this process. And universally, everyone I spoke to was glowing about the process and that it really helped identify trouble spots. It helped identify opportunities for growth. It did help celebrate success. And I think that even like this discussion tonight, it's good to have a facilitated discussion to get past some issues that is a collaborative that we have and kind of move forward. I mean, I think it is, ultimately, I'm making this decision in what's in the best interest for our students. And for me, it's making sure our new superintendent has all the information that he needs. And that I do think that, Director Hocker, you're right, we talk a lot about professional development. And I think we have to kind of walk the walk and talk the talk. I mean, we can't say we are supportive of professional development and see its great importance and then not be willing to do this ourselves. I also think that as we kind of look at everyone, and what is the phrase, everyone kind of staying in their lane. Everyone has an important job in the district. You know, teachers, administrators, board members. And I think that this whole process will help clarify what our role is as a board, what the superintendent's role is, what administrators are, staff, community members. I think it does a good job, and I think sometimes when we're looking at, I know a lot of what we've talked about is our need to focus on achievement and really look at analyzing and improving that. And I think that sometimes if you're operating outside your role, I'd like to think that if we can all get in our roles, that might help with some of the achievement. And if we're all operating from a place of, doing everyone else's work, it may be negatively impacting our students, and we don't know it. And so I guess I would like to try to improve the way we the way that we operate on behalf of our taxpayers. I will say that I think the cost is nominal, and for those interested, I did ask to pull the school board budget, which has been, the school board budget, we are well below our budget, and that's where this will come out of. We're almost $40,000 under budget for the year, which has not been accomplished in a long time. And so I think that's something that we can reinvest that into something for ourselves that will benefit the students. So, yes, go
I
ahead.
guess I would look at this and think, generally, seeing what it says it's going to do, I would definitely think it was not so useful. However, because the superintendent would like to do it, I would say I would support it. However, this idea that of staying in our roles, I think, is used to not think. And I think that's very detrimental to our students. And I've seen that in this board. And I really don't appreciate that talking down like that. But I do support having it just because the superintendent would like it. But I also think one of the things that will limit its use is because it's a public meeting and because you can't say what you really mean, because of that, it's really limiting in how useful it will be and what you really learn from it. That's all I guess I have to say about it.
Well, so the answers that when you respond to the questionnaire, you're not identified as an individual. And so it's an anonymous survey, and it will be kind of a public meeting. And I mean, it's as much as we make of it, I guess, is what even when I conducted the references, if you're not on board with it and you go in with that kind of preconceived notion that it's not going to be helpful, you probably will not find it helpful. If we can come in like most other trainings with an open mind and kind of a universal desire to do better and to learn more, I think it will. And I certainly I don't know if the comment is directed at me, Director Vodova. I don't mean to talk down when I talk about like lanes and roles, but I think as a history in the district, the board needs to remember that we're not running the school district. We're overseeing the running of it, and we employ the superintendent to do the day-to-day decisions. So I think it gets dangerous when the superintendent is stepping on our role and when we're stepping on another person's role, and it's a two-way street when I say that. It's not pointing to any one particular party. It's just having a better understanding of everyone's very important role in the running and operations of our district.
And at the end of the day, that's part of the reason I want to see, well, how the board is feeling about how they've been operating, so that I can get a better understanding of it, so that we can, improve what we're doing.
Exactly. Correct. Director Riley?
I just kind of want to echo Director Vodova here with, I wanted you to elaborate on what you're actually meaning by your comments of staying in your lane and exactly to whose standards are these lanes determined. I agree. This board doesn't do enough, and it leans on every other entity, and it sits on its hands. And so for me, this board has not been so great, right? And I feel like we could be a better board, and I actually don't appreciate the remarks that I've heard today.
I actually agree. We can be a better board, and that's why I want to do this. And my remarks are simply that our role as a school board is for governance and oversight. It's not to run the day-to-day. And I think that when we start to cross those lines, bad things happen, and we've seen that transpire this year, for example, in transportation. When we start to go outside and think we know more than we do in our professional experiences,
Excuse me.
we can tend to make
Point of
some
order.
errors.
I would say, I agree that the board should be from a point of governance, but governance by the ignorant is not good governance. So I think we should be using our skills and our critical thinking
Absolutely.
and learning with our governance, and I don't see that in this board all the time. That's the problem. And then it's being used to say, stay in your lane, instead of like, as like it's interrupting governance, instead of thinking and using that as part of your governance and discussing thoughts that people have and knowledge that they have to make better governance. That's not being done often. So that's, I guess, all I have to say about that. But I do think it's worthwhile to do a survey. I also think I've had lots of professional development at times that has been really not so good, like, and a lot of time wasted. And I notice we waste time, like, when we don't revoke a procedure and we're gonna talk about it again when it's, like, unnecessary, things like that. Like, there's a lot of time wasting in this board, and sometimes professional development can be wasted time. But I'm still willing to take the survey and to pay for the extra costs so that the superintendent gets the information he needs.
Director Kelsenberg.
I just think the survey that we are proposing will sort out a lot of these concerns that we're talking right now.
Absolutely.
We probably don't need to beat it up right now. Let the survey take care of that.
Absolutely. So this is not anything we have to vote on, and I'm sensing that there is consensus on doing the paid version, so I will go ahead and make those arrangements and appreciate the board's time tonight. There is nothing else on the agenda, so we are adjourned.